Hello everybody, how are you again? In this video we're gonna talk about domain controller. We said in the first video we said the server is a computer, is a special type of computer or just a computer that provide a services to the other computers in the network or in the context of network. So today we will talk about the first and most important service in the Windows server. Call it domain controller or Active Directory or domain system. First of all, what's the domain controller and why we're using the domain controller and why the domain controller is the most important service in the company or in the Windows server or in the company that using Windows server. First of all, domain controller like this. We have a server like this server here, and inside this server we install the domain controller. It is a service. Now, after install the domain controller in the server, that means our server become the domain controller server or domain controller. So the domain controller is like a domain, for example, lab.com. Inside this domain, I can add a user or I can register every computers or every users in the network. I have a network like this network. I have, for example, hundreds of thousands of computers or maybe thousands of computers and users and employees. I want to register or join all the computers in the domain controller, in the server. I want to register the users and computers in the server, in the domain controller. So from the server, I can control all the computers and users in the network. So the server with domain controller will be like a central control or central controller for in the computers. This service very important because it is using for security and authorization and authentication, and this services is very important in the company, especially in the company business company, for example, and universities and so on. Every user have a username and password and can log into the computer and by a specific username and password. And the username and password assigned from the administrator from the server. So from the server can do everything, can control everything with users and computers in the network. Here, for example, we can see I have a server like this, my server, for example. Inside this server, I install the domain controller and Active Directory. Inside domain controller, also we can add something called organizational unit. Can add many of organizational unit. Organizational unit, like if you work in the company, for example, of course in the company we have many departments. For example, human resource department, information technology department, and so on, right? For every department, I can make a separate organizational unit, and inside organizational unit I can add the users. Now here in this organizational unit, for example HR, I can add the user, for example U1, the user number 1, U2, the user number 2, and so on. Also in the other one, in the other domain or in the other organization unit, also I can add user 3, for example, and user 4, and so on. And also inside the domain controller, we have a container using for computers, also to add the computers or to register a computers inside the domain controller. For example, here I have computer 1, computer 2, and so on. Now the client, from the client side, I have many computers as a client here, for example. Just join to I register the computers and users in the domain controller. So here in the first computer, for example, we have user1. The user1 should add the username user1 and add the password, for example 123, to access the server, to access the computer. The user cannot access the computer, even the client computer, without authorizing from the administrator in the server. Also, administrator can change the password for the user, can make a disable to the account for the user1, for example. Also can work with the computer, can prevent the user to using control panel. Also can prevent, for example, user1 or u2 from using this computer. Can do everything, can implement many or multiple group policy. I mean group policy, I will talk about the group policy in the another subject, another video. A group policy, like rules or policies, administrator from the server can implement to the client and to the user that using a client computer. So I can prevent him to using control panel, prevent him to using the command line, and I can add the specific background for the computer and so on from the server. Also, other computer we have, for example, user2, you should add the password, for example, whatever, and the password, of course, from the administrator. Administrator can make the password and so on. Also here the domain controller, we can add the domain, for example, lab.com, like google.com or something like this. Here my server serve as domain controller, so my server is lab.com now. If the user want to join the computer, or to if this computer join or register in the server, and the domain controller will be, for example, u1 at lab.com, because this computer is a member in the domain. This computer, if I make join, will be a member in the domain lab.com. Like this here we can see I have Active Directory or domain controller server. I installed domain controller in the server, and I add user, add organizational unit like this. Inside it I add two users, Usama and Ahmed, for example, and join this computer Usama and this computer Ahmed, register those computers to the domain controller. Now the Usama will be Usama at lab.com because it is a member of the server, a member of the domain, and also add the IP address, of course. And then Ahmed at lab.com because Ahmed registered in the computer. Now I have in the domain controller here, I have computers, two computers, and I have user. Now we want to go to the practical side. The first thing, open the Windows Server 2019, Control Alt and insert, you know that. CSD Jihan 2020. And now I want to insert or to log into the server. If you just click here to make the screen cover all the computer, or the screen the computer. The first thing you should add or install the domain controller in the server. Using the Windows Server, I said everything, if you want to control everything, if you want to do everything, anything in the server, you should using the special software called Server Manager. Server Manager automatically will start working. If it does not work, now you can see Server Manager. But if it does not work automatically, just from start, and Server Manager, just click on it. Now just waiting after it is work. Now if you want to add a service, we say the server is a computer to provide a services. So the most important thing in the server, we should install a services. If you want to install any services, just from here add rules and features, or from manage, and same thing, add rules and feature. Now just click here and next again. Here I want to install. See, you can see here there's many of the services, DHCP, DNS, fax and Hyper-V, many of the services, IIS, for example, WDS, and so on. Now I want Active Directory domain. Active Directory domain services, because I want to make my computer, my server, Active Directory. Add feature, just click on it, add feature. Now next again, next, next. Very easy, just next and install. Just take a time. After complete, I will make some configuration to it. After some times, you can see like a hyperlink here, promote this server to domain controller. Just click on it to make a configuration. Promote the server to a domain controller. Now it is very important if you want to install the domain controller in the first time. You can see many of the choices here. The first one, add domain controller to an existing domain. Now it is the first time, so we don't have any domain controller, right? So you don't need to add a domain controller to an existing domain, because there is no domain. But if you have a domain controller and you want to add an extra domain, you should have another server, you should install another server, and you can add an extra domain. For example, if the first domain, for example, we have domain 1 lab.com and domain 2 lab2.com. If the lab1.com destroy or down or have a problem in this, the computers will convert or will transfer to the another server or another domain controller. Also, add a new domain to an existing forest. Add a new domain to an existing forest. If you have a domain also, you can add another domain like a child. For example, if you have a company, this company have a branch in the Arbil, for example, and have another branch in the Mosul. So in the Arbil we have a server, and in the Mosul, in the another branch, I want to add another server, another domain controller like a child, like this. If you don't have any domain, like me now, I don't have any domain, so add a new forest here. Why forest? It is just a domain, but say here just type a forest, because you can see here, for example, if we have a domain, the first domain controller here, for example, and here also we have another branch, and this branch you have another. From this we have another branch. From this here we have another. Here we have another one, and so on, like a tree. And also we have another domain, for example, here. And this domain also we have many of a tree of branches, and so on. So you can see like a forest. We have many domain, or we have many tree or multiple trees. So like a forest. So just call it forest because of that. But now here we will add just a domain, just a parent domain. Call it, for example, lab.com or whatever. You can add anything. You can add your name or just lab or whatever. Now next. Here select functional level of the new forest and root domain. Functional level, forest functional level and domain functional level. For example, if you have another domain, if you have another, we said we have multiple branch, for example, branches. If you want to add another server as a child to the server, so another server should at least have Windows Server 2016. At least, if you have another server in another company, and we want to make a join or connect between this server or this domain controller and another domain controller, this another domain controller should be at least Windows Server 2016, because here I said 2016. If I have, for example, in another branch, if we have Windows Server 2008, it will be not work, because I said here at least 2016. So it is better we just make it 2008. and here 2008. Now if the server 2008 will work, if it is 2016 also will work, because at least 2008, I said at least 2008. Here you can add just a password. The password should be complicated password. I mean by complicated password, you should have the um, at least 7 letters or 7 characters, and you should have letters and numbers and capital and small. For example, just type CSD Jihan 2020, CSD capital Jihan 2020, CSD capital Jihan again 2020, and that is, and next. Here next again. After that, just next until you can see install. Here just the database. I said the domain controller will store the computers and users. So you should have a database. The server have a database inside. So the database folder will be here, and the log folder will be here, and so on. You can changing from here or just let it by default as default. And next. Now next. Now if there is no problem, will work. If you have problem, for example, if you didn't make the IP address, or if you didn't add the IP address to the server, it will be not work. It'll ask you to just add the IP address. Now it is work. Just warning. Warning, that's no problem. If you see like a error or a red warning, that means it is problem. But now I can see install, and I can install the domain controller. Now after complete, just restart the computer, will automatically restart the server. Now after restarting complete, and open the server manager console, you can see here the dashboard. Now whenever you need to using the domain controller or Active Directory, just go to the tools from here in the server manager. Just go to the tools, and in the tools you can see, after just waiting for seconds to prepare. Now here, Active Directory users and computers. Just click here, you can access the Active Directory or domain controller. Whenever you need to using to add a new user, to add a new computer, to add groups and so on, just go to the tools and Active Directory users. This is very important. We will need using this always in this course. Here I will end this video, and in the next video we will talk about how to make a join between the computer, or how to join the computer and user in the Active Directory, and how to work with Active Directory. Thank you very much.